All right, hi everybody. I'm Coach Dean Salehyan here at KAATARO Jiu-Jitsu. I'm the judo instructor here. We've done a few other videos in the past. Today, I kind of want to talk about my perspectives starting out in judo. I already achieved a black belt in judo before I started doing jiu-jitsu. So I'm cross-training in both. I'm doing judo here a couple days a week, continuing to train in various different clubs. But for about 2 years now, I've done jiu-jitsu seriously. I kind of want to give some tips for people that maybe started out in judo, maybe achieved, higher rank, green, brown, black belt in judo, and then maybe want to start jiu-jitsu for various reasons. More and more people are starting to cross-train. They're starting to recognize that, maybe learning a bit of both is going to improve my overall game. So because more people are doing that, they're training in both, I thought I'd just give you my perspectives and my take on maybe the things I had to overcome, and maybe pointers for people that are making that transition to cross-train. So I've actually done this twice. So my martial arts journey, I started with a striking style, a karate style. And when I got to first degree black belt, my instructor, great guy, Patrick Marsh, I'm still in touch with him. He was kind of a life-changing person in my life because he introduced me to the martial arts and I just got a passion for it. But when I got my first degree black belt, he said, it's really important that you always keep in mind that you have more to learn. And a black belt's not the end of the journey. So he encouraged me to go and seek out other styles. So he did Eskrima, he did the Filipino stick fighting. He was pretty high level in that. So I'm like, okay, so what's different? And by that time, the mid-90s, the UFC had kind of proven that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was a formidable style, and you need to know ground fighting. You need to know some grappling, but there wasn't BJJ where I was at the time in college, or I couldn't afford it really. So I did judo, thinking, well, there's a grappling style. So I took off my black belt and put on a white belt and started at the beginning. And that was a little bit, less difficult mentally because you're going from a striking style to a grappling style, and you kind of know that I don't know any of this stuff, and I was just getting, schooled by people. They were mopping the floor with me because I didn't know the first thing about ground fighting coming from this striking style, or the first thing about grappling at all. So I fell in love with judo when I moved to Texas. I just started exclusively doing judo, and then when I got to first degree black belt again. And honestly getting a little bit older and recognizing that my body just wasn't taking the falls as much, I thought, well, I got this hole in my game in that, my newaza is pretty good. I think I'm pretty good at ground fighting, but I could always get better. So I took off the black belt, put on a white belt, started from the beginning. And for a lot of people, their ego gets in the way of that, right? So you think you know it all because you've achieved a black belt. But a black belt is just really the start of a journey, and you kind of have to swallow that pride a little bit, recognize the areas where you don't know anything or you don't know as much as you could know, and again, come into it from fresh eyes. Being a beginner is actually somewhat refreshing, right? Because you don't have to know it all. You can just be there and learn and sort of experience that all over again. So there's a lot of benefit to that, of just kind of mentally letting go of your pride, your ego, not claiming that you know everything, and finding people that are better at you, maybe not in all aspects of the game, but in certain aspects that you want to improve, and just genuinely learning from them. I can't emphasize that enough. And if you look at Jigoro Kano, the founder of judo, he was constantly incorporating different jiu-jitsu styles into what he was doing and coming into it from fresh eyes. And you look at the Gracie family, right? They were cross-training with wrestling and sambo and vale-tudo and picking up other things. So kind of having that mentality of I know it all limits your progress. And starting afresh and starting anew can be, a really cool part of your journey, and one that I've definitely benefited from. So 5 main points, 5 main takeaways. The first one is sort of come into it with fresh eyes. And I can't stress how important that is to sort of start with a beginner's perspective, a beginner's mind. Because chances are, if you've been doing judo for several years, you've done some newaza, you've done ground fighting. It might not be at a very, very high level. You might come from a school that does excellent newaza. But when you're coming into a new school with a new instructor, assuming that you trust your instructor and you like your instructor and that instruction is good quality instruction, just kind of come into it with fresh eyes and don't try to second guess anything that's being taught. There's a reason it's being taught that way. The instructor usually has a system or something in mind. So rather than thinking, this is not the way I would do things, or this is not the way I was taught in judo, it's kind of important to kind of leave that baggage and kind of just look at it from a fresh perspective and genuinely be there to learn. Point two is, I think a lot of people in judo get into jiu-jitsu because they want to get better at judo, right? They fundamentally think of themselves as judo players, and they want to pick up a little bit of BJJ to improve their judo game, maybe have better tournament performance. But if you want to get better at judo newaza, you're better off doing judo newaza, because the rules and the skills are specific to that style of competition. So in judo, for example, being pinned and being on your back can cause you to lose the match. So the flow of the roll is a little bit different in judo newaza to jiu-jitsu. In judo newaza, you spend a lot of time in turtle. People end up not wanting to go to their back. People aren't comfortable on their back. In jiu-jitsu, there's a lot more guard playing. You have a lot more time. So they're not exactly the same, even though there's crossover skills. So if you're doing jiu-jitsu, don't do it to get better at judo, but do it because you genuinely want to learn this new thing. By consequence, you will get better at judo newaza, but that shouldn't be your primary goal. Kind of come into it for its own sake and not to get better at judo.
You'd mentioned earlier, one of your tips was this is not, if you're doing jiu-jitsu to improve your judo, and you've mentioned that you noticed a hole in your game. How's that kind of different?
Well, so at that point I wasn't doing competitive judo anymore. Right, because I had a bad back, I used to compete a lot in my 20s and early 30s, and then my back just wasn't keeping up with the grind. But I knew sort of as a complete martial artist, I could be better at the ground fighting aspects. Because we had people at our judo school that were high level in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and when it came to the ground, they were just destroying me. And they were like blue, purple, maybe a couple brown belts. And I'm a black belt in judo, but these guys obviously know more than I do. So I recognized that, in terms of being a complete martial artist, this is something that I wanted to do, was to develop more ground fighting. But if I wanted to translate that into tournament judo, right, it's quite different, because here in jiu-jitsu, no one really goes to turtle, right? Whereas in judo, that's what everyone does. They go straight to their belly. So in judo, we spend a lot of time, maybe 50% of our newaza training is turning people over from turtle. If you're in turtle, attacking the other player, getting them on their back. So the flow and feel is different. And if you're doing competition judo and that's what you really want to succeed at, you can certainly cross-train with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and like Travis Stevens has shown some success there. But when you're entering a different rule set, you have to train for that rule set. Some of the skills don't necessarily translate from a, say, BJJ competition perspective or a self-defense perspective to a competition judo. There's going to have to be a little bit of adjustments here and there.
Have you found it kind of freeing that you're no longer in the competition sphere, or at least you're not necessarily involved in competitions, that you can kind of...
To be honest, I miss it. But now I have kids, and I got a job, and just the grind of showing up to practice every day, training for a couple hours a day, which is what I was doing in college. That's just kind of gone. I still kind of have this urge to compete a little bit, and maybe I'll do a couple here and there, but it's not the primary focus of why I'm training anymore. Now I'm coaching judo. Our kids' judo program is really successful. We're packed every class. We might be moving to a waiting list, and watching those kids go and compete and accomplish their competitive, judo dreams, and some of them are already talking about, when can I go to the Olympics and stuff like that. That's just cool to watch, and that's kind of where I'm getting my fulfillment now, is watching the kids come up and just learn new skills, make friends, compete. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, but watching them get better is now kind of why I'm doing judo for the most part. Third point that actually took me a little bit of time to break out of is don't rely so much on your takedowns. If you're in a school that starts standing sometimes, chances are that you can take down just about everybody, because a lot of jiu-jitsu practitioners just don't spend a whole lot of time on takedowns, so you can probably take them down relatively easily. But even starting on our knees, because you understand leverage, you understand takedowns, you can sort of end up starting from the dominant position in every roll. You can do a sweep, you can do a throw on your knees, you can get them to their back, and then you always start in that dominant position. And that's something that I had to overcome too in the beginning, because I was just finding that even starting on our knees, most people, I really didn't have a hard time getting on their back. But then you never learn playing from the bottom. And sometimes it's a really good training tool to allow yourself to be taken down or taken to your back and work out of that position instead of always going to a top position. And the third and kind of related, or the fourth and kind of related to that is get comfortable on your back, right? In Judo Newaza, especially if we're doing a lot of competition training, being pinned and being on my back means I'm losing. So whether I'm in cross side or side control or being mounted or keizagatame or whatever, in judo I'm losing. So judo players, like wrestlers, they tend to freak out when they're on their back. They think they're losing. They think the clock is running. So you tend to flail and kind of move in a little bit of an out of control way. So, if you're on your back and you're not in any risk of being submitted, just kind of get comfortable there. Learn how to play that position. And then the final thing that I would say is, it's really important for a judo player to slow down the pace. Coming from judo, the amount of time you have in newaza, especially for competition settings, is really limited. So judo players tend to go for really explosive, go for the arm bar, go for the choke, try to sink in the pin really, really quickly, and you tend to expend a lot of energy. Because again, there's limited time, the ref can stand you up, so the incentive is within 10-15 seconds to get that submission. And that's a great training mindset, but in jiu-jitsu, you're gonna gas yourself out doing that every single roll. So kind of learning to adjust the pace a little bit and to move into your submissions with a little more control, a little more patience, is gonna pay off in the long run, instead of trying to explode into everything and maybe losing a position or not doing things as cleanly as they can. So those are my 5 tips for people that are transitioning from judo and trying out jiu-jitsu for the first time. There's more to say about the inverse jiu-jitsu players going into judo, but that's just my take, my experience, the things that I came across as I was transitioning and starting to cross-train. I'm sure a lot of you watching have your own thoughts as well. So like and subscribe and put your comments in the bottom. Thanks.